Hello, welcome back to the sewing room. I'm Laura, and this week I want to talk to you about things you can do to troubleshoot if your sewing machine is running slower than you want it to. I don't know anybody who wouldn't love their sewing or crafting or any kind of life to be as easy as snapping their fingers. Of course, that's not real life. That's just the magic of editing. But there are things that you can do if your sewing machine is sewing slower, especially if it's sewing slower than it used to. There are some things that you should really check to make sure that your machine is operating at its best capacity. Now, judging from the comments people leave on my videos, you haven't clicked through this video and watched this because you want to hear a lecture from me about how productivity and speed is not necessarily the name of the game. As my late great friend Annie Modisette would say, people who make things don't make things because they want the things. We make things because making things makes us happy. And like, she was right, but also it's a lot easier to be happy when you're making things when all of your equipment is operating the way that it should. But if I'm wrong and you clicked through this video because you were just curious, I really would encourage you to watch a video I did a little while ago about why sewing takes time and that it's okay that your sewing takes time. First thing to check, is your machine clean? A clean machine is a happy machine, and a machine that is really bogged down will have to struggle and work harder to actually even sew. So, start with a quick clean and check of your machine. Video about that here. Number two, your machine is probably plugged in somewhere. Plugged into a wall, plugged into a power strip, whatever. Don't forget that that cord actually has two ends. There's the end that goes into the wall, and then there's the end that goes into the machine. And, maybe it's been in that same position for years, and maybe everything has been running fine, but it's also possible that the connection may have come a little bit loose. So if you have the kind of machine where you can unplug and plug in your power cord, you might want to do that just to make sure it's actually plugged in all the way, and also to make sure nothing looks strange when you unplug it. That would be an indication that something else needs to be checked and or replaced. Speaking of power strips, is your sewing machine plugged into the same power strip or even just on the same circuit as a device that also draws power, especially if that power kind of turns on and off? I'm using as an example here my iron, which I do know basically turns itself on and off over time. And in theory, if it was drawing enough power and the machine were feeling a little finicky that day, that could potentially cause the machine to run a little bit slower. Have I ever noticed that? No, but if I suspected that, I would probably try to isolate the sewing machine so that it was the only thing definitely going into that power strip or that plug, and maybe even the only thing on that circuit. Now, I know as a safety tip, a lot of people will advise something like make sure that you have your iron, your sewing machine, and maybe a lamp all plugged into the same, either power cord or power strip or whatever, because then you're less likely to forget to leave any of those things on, right? As you leave your sewing room, if there's a lamp involved, especially, it's nice and bright, so you're maybe a little bit more likely not to accidentally leave your iron and or your sewing machine plugged in. And I do agree with that as like day-to-day advice. That is excellent advice. It's really good. But when you're troubleshooting a machine, I would say like you can kind of put that aside for a little bit and see if, again, if some other electronic is potentially causing a slowdown on your sewing machine. You're using this moment to identify that problem and then maybe troubleshoot how you can avoid that in the future. So I would say overall, I still agree with that advice to have a power strip that you're plugging your sewing machine, your iron, and maybe a lamp into if you're a little absent-minded and are worried you'll forget and leave those things plugged in and unattended, which you should never do. Information about that in our previous video. But so just so you know, this is like a diagnostic thing, not a permanent thing. Another thing, since you're already checking out your electronics, is how old is your power strip? Could it be potentially needing to be replaced? I'm actually not super thrilled with this one that I just took out, because there's a crack. There's actually a crack in the plastic there. Is that necessarily a big deal? Maybe not. Is that maybe a slightly bigger deal that there's a crack in the plastic and clearly a rust spot right there? Yeah, that's a little bit of an issue. I'm also checking the actual plug to see if it looks like the plug looks like it's in good shape. Overall, this thing was probably about 10 bucks and I bought it more than 10 years ago, so it might be time to replace this. I'm really not loving that crack, and that's not worth, yeah, it's not worth keeping something like this if it's easily replaceable and affordable to replace, when it could be potentially causing big problems, not just for my sewing machine, but, you know, could cause major problems like a fire. So yeah, I'm going to be replacing this. This is not great. So just a reminder, just because it's on the floor or behind something doesn't mean you shouldn't take a look every once in a while. And then speaking of things that are on the floor or hidden away and potentially need to be replaced, how long has it been since you really looked, inspected closely the foot pedal on your machine? Now this is a really old one. And this is the kind that tends to be wired in, so if you had to replace it, you would probably be looking to hire someone to make that replacement, but it might be worth it. Sometimes these have not really survived the years as well as the rest of the sewing machine. I heard once that the electronics for this kind of pedal is actually based on ceramics on the inside. So if it's been dropped a few too many times, then it could potentially be having some faulty behavior, and then it won't run right, which is bad. But also, again, it's a potential, you know, fire hazard, which would be super rad. The other thing about these is part of how you kind of know if they're starting to go bad is if you sew barefoot, you'll actually sometimes feel the metal on the outside starting to heat up. That's not a good sign. So if you're experiencing that at all, or even if it just looks a little crummy, think about replacing it. They're not very expensive to replace, and it's well worth it, in my opinion, to keep a machine running well and to keep you safe. All right, this last one is a little niche, but if your sewing machine is actually operated by you running it by using a knee pedal, which this machine is, it's right here. So instead of putting my foot on a foot pedal and running the machine that way, I actually lean against that knee bar and it runs the machine. And most machines that are built this way do have, they still have the foot pedal, it's just kind of inside the machine. And then there's also a spring, I'll just show you. It would be just like me to be talking about safety, then knock over a hot iron. Anyway, try that again. Alright, so this particular one kind of opens out like that. You do want to be really gentle with it because those hinges are quite old. But let's take a closer look inside. First of all, if you didn't know better, you would think this machine was hardwired in, but it's not. It has a plug, just like on the other machine. It's just harder to see. So again, that's worth taking a quick look at if the machine's not running as fast as it should, to make sure that all the electrical connections are correct. But then as we even come further around, when I use the pedal, or when I use the knee bar, it actually moves a lever that then presses down on the foot pedal, like that. So another reason to just inspect and clean this whole area. It does get quite dusty, and you know, it's again just an opportunity to take a look and check out that the pedal looks like it's in good condition. But also there's a spring here, right here, connecting the knee bar to that, you know, device that actually pushes on the foot pedal. And that, you know, frankly, if that's grimy and gross, it's not going to work the way that it should. So again, just worth taking a quick minute to dust and clean, and maybe consider adding a teeny touch of oil to that spring to make sure it's working as it should. If this is your first time stopping by, thank you for coming by. If you've been here before, welcome back. Either way, hope to see you soon.